Join you today to talk about what we are focused on here at this Summit on Women and the Economy. Before I begin, I want to apologize for the delay, but there were so many people who showed up, and because this is the largest gathering of distinguished foreign diplomats in San Francisco since the founding of the United Nations, there was a little more of a delay in getting everyone in, and there are still people outside we hope will be able to get in. Before I begin my remarks, let me recognize a few of our special guests here. We have two members of Congress, Zoe Lofgren and Jackie Spear. Thank you very much for being with us. Two distinguished mayors. I want to welcome Mayor Edwin Lee and his wife Anita from right here in San Francisco. And Mayor Jean Kwan from Oakland. Thank you. And on a personal note, I want to acknowledge a wonderful friend and former Chief of Protocol, Charlotte Schultz. Thank you. Now, as this summit comes to a close, we will adopt a declaration for the first time in APEC's history that will affirm this organization and each member economy's commitment to improving women's access to capital and markets, to building women's capacities and skills, and to supporting the rise of women leaders in both the public and private sectors. And it is fitting that this declaration would be adopted here in San Francisco, because it was just 1 mile from here in the Herbst Theater where the United Nations Charter was signed 66 years ago. In fact, the APEC Summit, which brings you all here, is a celebration of that important occasion and a recognition that history is made right here in San Francisco. Because San Francisco is an appropriate venue for this economic discussion. Because this is a community that is renowned for its spirit of inclusion and opportunity for all. So on behalf of the United States and our people, I give each of you and your nations my heartiest welcome and my heartfelt thanks for being here and undertaking this great mission with us. Now, there will be a temptation on the part of those observing or covering this summit, perhaps on the part of those of us attending it as well, to say that our purpose is chiefly to advance the rights of women, to achieve justice and equality on women's behalf. And that is, of course, a noble cause, to be sure, and one that is very close to my heart. But at the risk of being somewhat provocative at the outset, I believe our goal is even bolder, one that extends beyond women to all humankind. The big challenge we face in these early years of the 21st century is how to grow our economies and ensure shared prosperity for all nations and all people. We want to give every one of our citizens, men and women alike, young and old alike, greater opportunity to find work, to save and spend money, to pursue happiness, ultimately to live up to their own God-given potentials. That is a clear and simple vision to state. But to make it real, to achieve the economic expansion we all seek, we need to unlock a vital source of growth that can power our economies in the decades to come. And that vital source of growth is women. With economic models straining in every corner of the world, none of us can afford to perpetuate the barriers facing women in the workforce. Because by increasing women's participation in the economy and enhancing their efficiency and productivity, we can bring about a dramatic impact on the competitiveness and growth of our economies. Because when everyone has a chance to participate in the economic life of a nation, we can all be richer. More of us can contribute to the global GDP. And the gap between the developed and the developing countries would narrow significantly as productivity rises in economies from Haiti to Papua New Guinea. But that great global dream cannot be realized by tinkering around the edges of reform, nor candidly can it be secured through any singular commitment on the part of us here. It requires rather a fundamental transformation, a paradigm shift in how governments make and enforce laws and policies, how businesses invest and operate, how people make choices in the marketplace. The transformational nature of this undertaking that lies ahead is, in my view, not unlike other momentous shifts in the economic history of our world. In the 19th century, many nations began moving from an agricultural to an industrial economy. Then the inventions and mass productions of that era gave rise in the 20th century to the information age and the knowledge economy with an unprecedented rise in innovation and prosperity. As information transcends borders and creates opportunities for farmers to bank on mobile phones and children in distant villages to learn remotely, I believe that here at the beginning of the 21st century, we are entering the participation age, where every individual, regardless of gender or other characteristics, is poised to be a contributing and valued member of the global marketplace. In some APEC economies, this transformation has been underway for quite a while now. In others, it has begun more recently, but in all, progress has been too slow and too uneven. But there is no doubt that the increasing numbers of women in the economy and the rising productivity gains from improving the distribution of their talents and skills has helped fuel significant growth everywhere. And economies that are making the shift more effectively and rapidly are dramatically outperforming those that have not. So if we are serious about this undertaking, if we really want to achieve parity for women in the workforce, both that they participate and how they participate, then we must remove structural and social impediments that stack the deck against them. Now, I don't urge this because it is the right thing to do, though I believe that it is. But for the sake of our children and our nations, it is necessary to do. Because a rising tide of women in an economy raises the fortunes of families and nations. Now, my husband often says, in making the argument that everyone should be involved, that we don't have a person to waste. I think that's true. When it comes to the enormous challenge of our time to systematically and relentlessly pursue more economic opportunity in all of our lands, we don't have a person to waste. And we certainly don't have a gender to waste either. So let's look at the evidence. The case for unlocking the potential of women and including them more fully in the economic life of our nations begins with the accounting of how women already are driving growth. The 21 economies of APEC are among the most dynamic in the world. Together we represent more than half of total economic global output. And more than 60% of women in the APEC economies are part of our formal workforces. They're opening stores, they're running businesses, they're harvesting crops, they're assembling electronics and designing software. The Economist points out that the increase in employment of women in developed countries during the past decade has added more to global growth than China has, and that's a lot. And in the United States, a McKinsey study found that women went from holding 37% of all jobs to nearly 48% over the past 40 years. And that in sheer value terms, these women have punched well above their weight. The productivity gains attributable to this modest increase in women's overall share of the labor market accounts for approximately 1/4 of the current U.S. GDP. That works out to more than $3.5 trillion, more than the GDP of Germany, and more than half the GDPs of both China and Japan. So the promise is clear. What then is the problem? If women are already making such contributions to economic growth, why do we need a major realignment in our thinking, our markets, and our policies? Why do we need to issue a declaration from this summit? Well, because evidence of progress is not evidence of success. And to be sure, the rate of progress for women in the economies of our region varies widely. Laws, customs, and the values that fuel them provide roadblocks to full inclusion. In the United States, and in every economy in APEC, millions of women are still sidelined, unable to find a meaningful place for themselves in the formal workforce. And some of those who get to enter the workforce are really confined by very clear signals to a lower rung on the job ladder. And there's a web of legal and social restrictions that limit their potential. Or they are confronted with a glass ceiling that keeps them from the most senior positions. Only 11 of the CEOs of the Fortune Global 500 companies are women. That's less than 3%. Some women in the APEC region don't have the same inheritance rights as men. So they can't inherit property or businesses owned by their fathers. Some don't have the power to confer citizenship on their children. So their families have less access to housing and education, and they must constantly renew residency permits, making it harder for them to work. Some are even subject to different taxes than men. Too often they are denied access to credit and may even be prohibited from opening bank accounts, signing contracts, purchasing property, incorporating a business, or filing lawsuits without a male guardian. Some women earn almost as much as men before they have children, but less afterwards, and even less if they are single mothers. These barriers and restrictions, some formal, some informal, erode women's abilities to participate fully in their economies and to support their families, whether as employees or entrepreneurs. Now, these barriers are certainly not unique to this region, the Asia-Pacific region. Variations of them can be found everywhere in the world. But because this is the most dynamic economic region in the world, what we do will have an impact on everywhere else. Some barriers are left over from a different time and haven't changed to reflect new economic realities or concepts of justice. Some seek to preserve an economic order that ensures that men have the higher paying jobs to support their families. And some reflect lingering cultural norms, the belief that women need to be protected from work that is thought to be dangerous or unhealthy for them. In truth, what is dangerous is denying ourselves the level of economic growth we need to build stronger societies. And what is unhealthy is for women to be denied the chance to contribute fully to that growth. Because that denies everyone, first and foremost their families, a chance at greater prosperity. Now, economic orders do not perpetuate themselves. They are made and remade through countless decisions, small and large, by economic policy makers, political leaders, and business executives. So if we want to see opportunities for women improve, we must begin with sound economic policies that explicitly address the unique challenges that limit women. And here's why. A Goldman Sachs report shows how a reduction in barriers to female labor force participation would increase America's GDP by 9%. We admit we still have such barriers. It would increase the Eurozone's by 13%, and they need it, and Japan's by 16%. Unlocking the potential of women by narrowing the gender gap could lead to a 14% rise in per capita incomes by the year 2020 in several APEC economies, including China, Russia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, and Korea. Of course, rising income means increased spending, which in itself helps to fuel more growth. And here too, women make a strong contribution. A boss